All right, guys, a shocking new study just came out the other day. It looked at the fact that the microplastics found within carotid artery plaques, which is interesting. You know, first of all, how do you get that? Well, there's a procedure called a carotid endarterectomy, where somebody who has a clogged carotid artery often is at risk for a stroke. And so what they do is they open that up, remove that plaque. And so they put some of that plaque under the microscope, and they did histopathology on it, and they found lots of plastic in there. And they found those people that had greater amounts of plastic were significantly increased risk for further cardiovascular disease. So that in itself is quite disturbing. And we've known that plastics have been a problem for many, many years now. You know, it's estimated that about 71% of all the plastics ever been produced on Earth is still floating around out there. I think 29% of it has been recycled in some form or fashion. It affects our hydrosphere, our atmosphere, our lithosphere, and our biosphere. So it's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the land, and it's in the plants and animals. So it's really hard to avoid these things. Microplastics and also nanoplastics. Microplastics being below 5 millimeters and nanoplastics being less than a micrometer. So how do we get these into our body? You know, so we can actually breathe it in. It's actually, there's particulate stuff floating in the air, which is pretty depressing to think about. We consume it through liquids and foods that we consume, and also it can be absorbed through dermal contact. And so I mean, the real answer is it's really hard to avoid this stuff, probably likely impossible. You know, the good news is we do have some capacity to clear these from our body through the urine, through feces, you know, through different systems there. So, you know, here's what I caution you guys about. Now, with this information, there will undoubtedly be a slew of wellness mama gurus and things like that popping up and telling you how to get rid of these plastics and stuff like that. Some will be some crazy supplement, which I would be very cautious about spending my money on. There may be some good advice, you know, let's avoid plastic drinking bottles. You know, there's certain salts that have higher concentrations of plastics. Obviously, a lot of the, you know, you think about all the domestic products, you know, the skincare products, most of them come in plastic containers. But the reality is it's going to be really, really hard to avoid these particular products. You know, one thing that's interesting along this is that things like leaky gut. Now there's a certain size of particle that can get through our gut, you know, barrier. Now, when that gut barrier is enlarged, then we can draw in more particles, at least from the food standpoint, food and liquid standpoint. And so perhaps not having a so-called leaky gut might be beneficial there. How do you not have a leaky gut? Well, your diet has an impact on that. Things like gluten and some people will say lectins and sugars and processed foods and things like that will reduce the incidence of leaky gut. And we know a lot of people that go on carnivore diets, there's experimental evidence done, you know, from the Paleomedicina group looking specifically at leaky gut via PEG 400, which is a way, you know, a validated way to test for this, has shown that pretty much resolves that in many cases. And so at least there's one thing you can do. You know, I'm going to look into this in more detail because this is an interesting topic for sure. But like I said, I would caution you to be very careful about people trying to sell you products for this stuff, because I suspect most of them aren't going to work, or aren't going to work to the degree that you think they do. So just be on the lookout. I'm sure there'll be some coming down the pike, some magic, you know, Dr. Jimbo's magic plastic reducer formula or something like that. So just be cautious about that. Because that's going to be happening. You know, obviously, I think as a society we should consider, hey, let's get away from so much of the plastic stuff. I know that's a tough thing to do because plastics have been so useful, quite honestly. You know, but you know, obviously, when we've got vegan leather versus, you know, leather, I mean, perhaps leather might be a better option. So things to think about, guys. Let me know what you guys think about that. Plastic, you know, again, cardiovascular disease, there's some evidence to think that it may be inflammatory. I suspect it might be. So we're still going to be learning a lot about this stuff over the coming years, I'm sure. Gosh, tough one, guys. Let me know what you guys think about this situation, and we'll talk to you soon.